Have you ever wondered why two people can earn the same salary, live in the same city, and even work the same number of hours, yet one of them quietly builds wealth, while the other spends an entire lifetime living paycheck to paycheck? For decades, most of us were taught one simple formula: go to school, get good grades, find a secure job, work hard, save money, and eventually you'll become financially successful. It sounds reasonable. In fact, millions of people still believe it. But what if that formula was never designed to make you wealthy? What if it was only designed to make you financially stable, while real wealth follows an entirely different set of rules? That question changed the lives of millions of readers around the world when a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad was published. It wasn't filled with complicated financial formulas. It didn't promise overnight riches. Instead, it challenged the way people think about money itself. It introduced a simple but powerful idea. Sometimes, the biggest difference between becoming wealthy and staying broke isn't how much money you earn. It's what you believe about money. Hello, I'm Olivia Vale. Welcome to Nexoryth. If you're interested in understanding money, business, psychology, investing, and the hidden principles behind building long-term wealth, make sure to subscribe. Every week, we explore the world's most influential financial ideas, timeless business lessons, and the hidden systems shaping modern life, breaking them down into practical insights you can actually understand and apply. And I'd strongly encourage you to stay until the very end of this video, because the final lesson from this book is, in my opinion, the most important one. It's an idea that has completely changed the way millions of people think about work, investing, financial freedom, and building wealth. Today, we're not simply summarizing Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We're exploring the mindset behind it, the ideas that made it one of the most influential personal finance books ever written. The lessons that challenge traditional thinking about jobs, income, assets, debt, education, and financial independence. Some people agree with every idea in this book. Others strongly disagree with parts of it. But almost everyone agrees on one thing. After reading it, they never looked at money the same way again. So let's explore the lessons that made Rich Dad, Poor Dad one of the most talked about financial books in the world. The lesson that challenges everything we were taught about money. One of the reasons Rich Dad, Poor Dad became so influential isn't because it teaches complicated financial strategies. It's because it asks a question that most people never stop to consider. What if the advice we've followed our entire lives was never designed to build wealth? That's a bold question. And before we go any further, it's worth saying something important. This book isn't telling people that education is useless, or that having a job is a mistake. Those are common misunderstandings. What the book actually challenges is the belief that a good salary alone is enough to create financial freedom. Robert Kiyosaki introduces two father figures. One is highly educated, works hard, believes in job security, values stable income. The other thinks very differently. He believes financial education matters just as much as academic education. He constantly asks, how can I make money work for me? Instead of spending my life working for money, that's the central idea of the entire book. Not jobs versus businesses, not rich versus poor, but different ways of thinking. Think about the advice most of us hear growing up. Study hard, find a secure job, work for 40 years, retire comfortably. For many people, that's still the definition of success. And for some, it's absolutely the right path. But the book asks an uncomfortable question. What happens if that path no longer guarantees financial security? What happens when inflation rises, housing becomes more expensive, retirement takes longer, and one paycheck is no longer enough? Suddenly, working hard doesn't feel as predictable as it once did. That's why Kiyosaki argues that financial education has become essential. Because schools teach us how to become employees, but very few teach us how money actually works. Again, whether you agree with that statement or not, it's worth thinking about. Most people spend years learning mathematics, history, science, and languages. Yet many finish school without understanding investing, cash flow, taxes, or how assets generate income. And those subjects affect almost every adult for the rest of their lives. That idea alone explains why the book resonated with millions of readers. It wasn't offering magic solutions. It was encouraging people to ask better questions. Instead of asking, "How do I earn a higher salary?" the book encourages another question. How do I build financial freedom? Those sound similar, but they lead to very different decisions. One focuses on earning. The other focuses on ownership. And ownership becomes one of the most important ideas throughout the book. Not because owning something automatically makes you wealthy, but because ownership creates opportunities that wages alone often cannot. Now, this doesn't mean everyone should quit their job tomorrow. In fact, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes people make after reading this book. They confuse inspiration with instruction. The real lesson isn't, leave your job. The real lesson is, don't depend on only one source of financial security if you have the opportunity to build others. That's a much more balanced interpretation. A stable career can provide income. That income can then be used to build investments, learn new skills, start a business, or purchase assets over time. It's not one path replacing another. It's understanding that relying on only one path can make your financial future more vulnerable. Perhaps that's why this book continues to be discussed decades after it was published. Because it doesn't simply talk about money. It changes the questions people ask themselves. And sometimes, one better question is worth far more than one more answer. Which brings us to the lesson that probably became the most famous idea in the entire book. A lesson that sounds incredibly simple, yet completely changes the way many people see wealth. The difference between an asset and a liability. The simple idea that changed the way millions see money. If you've ever heard someone talk about rich dad, poor dad, there's a good chance you've heard this sentence before. The rich buy assets. The poor and the middle class buy liabilities they think are assets. It's probably the most famous idea in the entire book. And at first, it sounds almost too simple. But once you understand what Robert Kiyosaki is trying to say, you begin looking at almost every financial decision differently. Let's start with a basic question. What exactly is an asset? Most people answer by saying a house, a car, something expensive. But that's not how the book defines it. According to Kiyosaki, an asset is something that puts money into your pocket. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. That's it. A surprisingly simple definition. Now, of course, in accounting and finance, there are more technical definitions, and professional accountants use the terms differently. However, Kiyosaki intentionally simplifies the concept because he's trying to teach a mindset, not an accounting course. And that's an important distinction. Think about a rental property. If it consistently generates income after covering its expenses, it behaves like an asset. Think about shares in a profitable company that pay dividends, or a business that continues earning money without depending entirely on your daily labor. Or even a digital product that continues selling long after you've created it. These are examples of things that have the potential to generate income over time. Now compare that with something many people dream about owning. A luxury car. It's beautiful, comfortable. Maybe it's even your dream vehicle. But the moment you drive it away, it begins losing value. Then come insurance payments, maintenance, fuel, repairs, registration. The car may improve your lifestyle, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with enjoying that. But financially, it's usually taking money out of your pocket rather than putting money into it. That's the distinction Kiyosaki wants readers to notice. Not because buying nice things is always wrong, but because many people purchase liabilities before they've built enough assets to comfortably support them. And that single habit can quietly delay financial freedom for years. Now here's where I think this lesson becomes even more interesting. The real message isn't, never buy nice things. That's a misunderstanding that often appears online. The real message is about order. Build assets first. Then let those assets help pay for the lifestyle you want. It's a completely different philosophy. Instead of working your entire life to support expensive possessions, you gradually build possessions that support your life. That shift may sound small, but over 20 or 30 years, it can completely transform someone's financial future. Imagine two friends. Both receive a bonus at work. The first immediately upgrades their car. The second decides to invest that money into something that has the potential to grow. 5 years later, their decisions may begin producing very different results. Not because one person is smarter, but because one prioritized consumption while the other prioritized ownership. And perhaps that's why this lesson became so memorable. It forces people to stop asking, "What do I want to buy?" and start asking, "What will this decision do for me 5 years from now?" That's a far more powerful question, because every financial decision creates a direction. Some decisions increase future freedom. Others increase future obligations. Neither happens overnight, but they accumulate. And that's something Kiyosaki emphasizes throughout the book. Wealth is rarely created by one extraordinary decision. More often, it's the result of ordinary decisions repeated consistently over many years. Every time someone chooses to build another asset, they're quietly strengthening their future. Every time someone takes on another unnecessary financial obligation, they're quietly making that future a little heavier. Of course, real life is more complicated than any single rule. People buy homes for stability, cars for convenience, education for opportunity. Not every purchase fits neatly into one category. And that's perfectly true. The real value of this lesson isn't the labels. It's the way it changes your thinking. Before making a financial decision, you naturally begin asking, is this helping me build wealth or simply helping me spend it? Sometimes, that one question is enough to prevent years of financial regret. And perhaps that's why millions of readers remember this chapter long after finishing the book. Because it doesn't just explain money, it changes the way people look at every dollar they earn, which naturally leads to another lesson that may be even more important. If building wealth is really about creating assets, then why do so many intelligent people spend their entire lives working for money instead of learning how to make money work for them? The difference between working for money and making money work for you. There's one sentence in Rich Dad, Poor Dad that people quote more than almost any other. The rich don't work for money. They make money work for them. At first, it sounds like one of those motivational quotes people post on social media. But the more you think about it, the more you realize it's describing two completely different ways of living. Let's imagine two people. The first person depends entirely on one paycheck. Every month follows the same pattern. Go to work, earn money, pay bills, start over. If they stop working, the income stops. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's how millions of honest, hardworking people live. But the book asks a very important question. What happens if that's your only source of income for the next 40 years? That's where the idea becomes interesting. Because financial freedom isn't about how much you earn. It's about how dependent you're on earning it tomorrow. Now imagine someone else. They also have a full-time job. But instead of spending every extra dollar, they slowly begin building things that can generate income. Maybe they invest in index funds. Maybe they own shares in businesses. Maybe they build an online business. Maybe they create digital products. Maybe they purchase a rental property. The details don't matter. The principle does. Little by little, their money begins producing additional income. Not enough to replace their salary overnight, but enough to start changing the equation. Eventually, their paycheck is no longer carrying the entire weight of their financial life. And that's exactly what Kiyosaki means. He's not saying jobs are bad. He's saying dependence is risky. Those are two completely different ideas. Unfortunately, many people misunderstand this lesson. Some read the book and think, I should quit my job. Personally, I don't think that's what the lesson is about. A stable job can be one of the best financial tools you have. It provides income, experience, discipline, opportunities. The mistake isn't having a job. The mistake is believing that one paycheck alone will always be enough. History shows us that economies change, industries change, technology changes, companies change, and sometimes careers change overnight. That's why having only one source of financial security can make life much more stressful. Think about it this way. Imagine sitting on a chair with one leg. As long as nothing moves, you might stay balanced. But the moment something changes, the entire chair becomes unstable. Now imagine a chair with 4 strong legs. If one weakens, the others continue supporting you. Financially, the same principle applies. Multiple sources of income don't eliminate risk, but they reduce dependence. And reducing dependence creates something incredibly valuable. Options. The option to leave a job that no longer makes you happy. The option to survive unexpected financial challenges. The option to make decisions based on opportunity instead of desperation. Perhaps that's the real meaning behind making money work for you. It's not about becoming rich overnight. It's about gradually creating more choices, more flexibility, more freedom. There's another lesson hidden inside this idea. Most people see money as something to spend. Wealthy thinkers often see money as an employee. Instead of asking, what can this money buy? They ask, what can this money build? That's a fascinating shift. Because every dollar suddenly has a job. Some dollars buy education. Some buy investments. Some build businesses. Some create future opportunities. The goal isn't to keep money sitting still forever. The goal is to place it somewhere it has the potential to create more value over time. Now, does that mean every investment succeeds? Of course not. Every investment carries risk. Markets fluctuate. Businesses fail. Opportunities don't always work out. And that's another reason this lesson is so important. Financial education matters. Understanding risk matters. Patience matters. Because making money work for you isn't about gambling. It's about making thoughtful decisions based on knowledge rather than emotion. Perhaps that's why this book continues to inspire readers decades after it was published. Not because it gives people easy answers, but because it changes the way they ask financial questions. Instead of asking, how much money can I make this month? They begin asking, how can I build something that continues creating value long after today's work is finished? And maybe that's one of the biggest mindset shifts separating people who spend their entire lives earning money from those who eventually build lasting wealth. Which brings us to what I believe is the most important lesson in the entire book. Because after discussing assets, cash flow, and financial education, everything comes down to one simple idea. The way you think about money will ultimately determine the life you build with it. The greatest lesson isn't about money. After reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, many people walk away thinking the book is about investing, or real estate, or businesses. But personally, I think the biggest lesson is much deeper than that. It's about responsibility. Not responsibility for the economy, not responsibility for governments, not responsibility for markets, responsibility for your own financial education. Because one idea appears again and again throughout the book. Nobody will care about your financial future more than you do. Think about that for a moment. Schools can teach mathematics. Companies can provide jobs. Banks can offer loans. Governments can create policies. But none of them can make financial decisions on your behalf. Eventually, every adult reaches the same point, the point where they have to decide what to do with the money they earn. Save it, spend it, invest it, waste it, or use it to build something greater. And those decisions, repeated over years, quietly shape an entire life. That's why Kiyosaki places so much emphasis on financial education. Not because everyone needs to become an entrepreneur, not because everyone should become a real estate investor, but because understanding money has become one of the most valuable life skills anyone can develop. The interesting part is, financial education doesn't begin with complicated investments. It begins with curiosity, asking questions, reading books, understanding how money flows, learning why businesses succeed, learning how investments work, learning from mistakes, and continuing to improve year after year. Perhaps that's why some people completely misunderstand this book. They look for shortcuts, quick money, secret investments, easy success. But if you read carefully, the real message is almost the opposite. The book encourages people to think independently, to stop blindly following financial advice, to question old assumptions, to become lifelong students of money, because markets change, technology changes, the economy changes, and the people who continue learning usually adapt far better than those who believe they already know enough. There's another lesson that often gets overlooked. The book repeatedly reminds readers that fear and greed influence financial decisions far more than most people realize. Fear keeps people from investing. Fear keeps people from learning. Fear keeps people trapped in situations they've already outgrown. Then, greed appears. People chase unrealistic returns, jump into investments they don't understand, believe every promise of easy money, and often, they lose everything. That's why emotional control becomes just as important as financial knowledge. You can understand investing and still make terrible investment decisions if emotions take control. Likewise, you can understand budgeting and still overspend if you're constantly trying to impress other people. Money has always been psychological. The numbers matter, but the behavior behind those numbers matters even more. And perhaps that's why Rich Dad Poor Dad continues to inspire readers nearly 3 decades after its publication. Not because every reader agrees with every opinion in the book. Many economists have criticized some of its ideas. Many investors have different philosophies, and that's perfectly healthy. No single book contains every answer. However, the questions it asks remain incredibly valuable. Questions like, am I building assets or simply collecting expenses? Am I improving my financial education every year? Am I creating opportunities or only chasing paychecks? Those questions force people to think. And sometimes, thinking differently is the first step toward living differently. So maybe the greatest lesson of Rich Dad Poor Dad isn't about becoming rich at all. Maybe it's about becoming financially aware, because awareness changes decisions. Better decisions change habits. Better habits shape the future. And over time, that future begins to look very different from the one most people accidentally drift into. If there's one sentence I'd leave you with after discussing this book, it's this. The biggest investment you'll ever make isn't in the stock market, real estate, or a business. It's in the way you think about money. Because once that changes, everything else has the potential to change with it. If you enjoyed this breakdown of Rich Dad Poor Dad, subscribe to Nexoryth. Every week, we explore influential books, timeless business ideas, money psychology, investing, economics, and the hidden principles behind building long-term wealth. And before you leave, I'd love to hear from you. What's the most valuable financial lesson you've ever learned from a book or from your own experience? Share it in the comments. Someone reading your answer might discover an idea that changes their financial future. Until next time, I'm Olivia Vale. Keep learning, keep questioning, and never stop investing in the one asset that appreciates for a lifetime: your mind.